My dear students, and once again, myself, Mrs. Noreen Dunwell, welcome you back to the English online classes. Okay, now we people have already completed in the previous videos the chapter Should Wizard Hit the Mommy, and very soon you will receive the PDF related to the extra questions of that chapter. I'm planning to start a new chapter, The Enemy. Now, this particular chapter, a very beautiful one, but it's a lengthy one. And I would like you people to keep pace with this chapter's video, because very often it will happen that after you have gone through the two videos, in the fourth video, you might start thinking what was done in the previous two videos, the first and the second one. So I would like you people to keep a pace with each and every video that is related to this chapter. Now, what this chapter is all about: The Enemy by Pearl S. Buck. This chapter, The Enemy, as I always say, is rendering a very beautiful message. You know, a human comprises of many virtues. Virtues means good qualities, right? And when we people talk about the good qualities, obviously, we people are talking about qualities like honesty, kindness, caring, loving, compassionate, etc. etc. And also a very big virtue, or you can say that a very vital virtue, that is patriotism, a love for one's own country. But do you think that patriotism is really that important? Please don't take it otherwise. That important when I mean to say that whether there is any other virtue which is even much more important than this virtue. Yes, it is. It is. And that virtue is humanity. To have compassion. Above all is this virtue, humanity. And this chapter revolves around that. Actually, in this, there is one doctor, a Japanese doctor, Dr. Sadao. A very good doctor, he's a surgeon as well. And this story is written at the time when the war broke out between America and Japan. And for all the Americans, Japanese were enemies, and for all the Japanese, Americans were enemies. And we are going to talk about this one doctor named Dr. Sadao. He's a Japanese doctor living in Japan, practicing there. He's a surgeon as well, and he's having quite a good name in his country to be one of the best doctors. And then an incident took place in his life where he fell into a dilemma, a confusion, a puzzled situation, where he was torn between his duty of being a doctor. And you know what's the duty of a doctor? Every doctor, when he or she completes the degree, takes a pledge that they will save a life if it is there in their hand, despite of caste, creed, religion, race, community, etc. So Dr. Sadao's life was suddenly turned over when an incident took place where he was caught in a dilemma between his duty and a very important virtue that a person must possess, that is patriotism, means love for his country, Japan. The story circulates round and round the various situations, how he and his wife Hannah, they went through the situation, what all kind of emotional breakthrough they had, then what all fright went through them, how they dealt with it, and at the last, what was the possible solution taken out by Dr. Sadao to handle the situation. But whatever you say, you can say that the entire story is about possessing humanity, which is the most vital quality a person must possess, because if humanity is there, the world will survive. Otherwise, if everyone start thinking about only their own country, their own people, the world will come to an end one day. So let's begin this chapter, a very interesting one, but little lengthy. I hope I'll be able to keep your interest in the story. Chapter 4, The Enemy by Pearl S. Buck. Dr. Sadao Hockey's house was built on a spot off the Japanese coast where, as a little boy, he had often played. The low, square stone house was set upon rocks well above a narrow beach that was outlined with bent pines. As a boy, Sadao had climbed the pines, supporting himself on his bare feet, as he had seen men do in the South Seas when they climbed for coconuts. His father had taken him often to the islands of those seas, and never had he failed to say to the little brave boy at his side, "Those islands yonder, they are the stepping stones to the future for Japan." "Where shall we step from them?" Sadao had asked seriously. "Who knows?" his father had answered. "Who can limit our future? It depends on what we make it." Dr. Sadao Hockey's house, very beautifully been described over here, that it was built at a particular place which was near to the Japanese coastal area, and very often as a little boy he used to play by that coastal side. The house is surrounded by low square stone. This house is set up on the rocks and is by the narrow beach side, and is outlined with bent pines. You know, pine trees, the trees which can be brought down very easily, and this is the pine trees we people are talking about, on which Sadao as a small child he used to climb. You might have seen the people climbing on the coconut tree, tying both the legs, and then after that they climb up on the trees to take out the coconuts from there. Yeah, the same way. So the house is built up on the beach side. It is a low square stone house which was set upon the rocks, means all the sides rocks were there on the other sides of the house, and it was on the beach side, and the house was boundaried. It was, all the sides was covered by the bent pines, and Dr. Sadao, when he was a boy, he used to climb up on those pines, supporting himself with the bare feet, and he had done this copying the people whom he had seen climbing up on the coconut trees. He says that his father used to take him to the islands of those seas. Means his house was by the seaside, okay, near the beach, and his father often used to take him to the islands which were there in those seas. And he always used to tell this little boy, means Sadao as a boy, he always used to tell them that those islands yonder, they are the stepping stones to the future for Japan. He says that those islands yonder, here it means that those islands are wonder makers. And always remember that they are the stepping stones to future. Means these islands will make the future for Japan. Sadao very seriously, he used to ask him, "Okay, where shall we step from them?" Child will be asking questions according to his intellectual level. His father said that it is the stepping stone to future for Japan. So he asked him where we will be stepping into when we go through this island. So his father said, "Who knows? No one's future can be predicted. It depends upon what we make it." Yes, that's true. Your future is in your hand. The future will be made according to what you want to make out of it. Then further, Sadao had taken this into his mind as he had did everything his father said. His father, who never joked or played with him, but who spent infinite pains upon him, who was his only son. Sadao knew that his education was his father's chief concern. For this reason, he had been sent at 22 to America to learn all that could be learned of surgery and medicine. He had come back at 30, and before his father died, he had seen Sadao become famous not only as a surgeon but as a scientist. Because he was perfecting a discovery which would render wounds entirely clean, he had not been sent abroad with the troops. Also, he knew there was some slight danger that the old general might need an operation for a condition for which he was now being treated medically. And for this possibility, Sadao was being kept in Japan. Sadao, he followed his father, whatever he said, and he kept everything that he said in his mind. With regard to Sadao's father, he was a very simple sort of a man, a very traditional Japanese, He believed that he believed in being a true Japanese. And like how the fathers, they generally spend time with their children, playing about, joking around and all, he never did all those things. But he had taken numerous number of pains to give the best to his son, especially education. Because of that reason, Sadao was sent to America when he was 22, so that he can learn everything about surgery and medicine. After 8 years, when he turned 30, he returned back to his country, Japan. And before his father died, his father was honored to hear his son become not only a famous surgeon but also a scientist. Now, when I talk about Sadao being a surgeon and a scientist, here I would like to remind you that I said this story is written in the highlight of the war that broke out between America and Japan. And during that time period, when the war broke out, you might be knowing that when the army is sent to fight the battles, along with that, doctors are also sent. But Sadao, even though he was a famous surgeon, a very good doctor, he was not sent with the troop. He was kept in Japan. Two reasons are there. Two very solid reasons. The first reason, actually, Dr. Sadao was not only a surgeon but a scientist. And he was trying to make a discovery perfect. He was not doing a discovery, he was bringing a discovery to perfection level. What was that discovery? He was trying to make the discovery of cleaning of wound to its perfection. Means he was trying to make that medicine of whatever is been discovered for cleaning of wound to be so perfect that it will do its work 100%. That is why he was not sent with the troops abroad. Also, the second reason was the general. The general of the Japanese army was slight old, or you can say that he was old. And he was having a condition in which he could need an operation anytime. He was already under medicinal treatment and he could need an operation anytime. And for that, Sadao was the best person, the best doctor, the best surgeon. So that is why Sadao was held back and not sent along with the troop. Further, clouds were rising from the ocean now. The unexpected warmth of the past few days had at night drawn heavy fog from the cold waves. Sadao watched mist hide outlines of a little island near the shore and then come creeping up the beach below the house, wreathing around the pines. In a few minutes, fog would be wrapped about the house too. Then he would go into the room where Hannah, his wife, would be waiting for him with the two children. Okay, in this paragraph, the surrounding of his house has been described. The atmosphere outside, the weather outside, the climatic situation. And in the first two paragraphs, I hope I'm very much clear to you people. In the first paragraph, the situation of his house has been mentioned, where it is situated, and in the second paragraph, we have come across why Sadao was not sent along with the troop. And now, his house was situated by the beach side. Clouds were rising up from the ocean, and the warmth in the surrounding, which was there from past few days, what it was doing, this heavy fog was drawn from the cold waves, and then slowly it was turning into mist of fog, which was hiding the outline of everything. From Sadao's house, an island could be seen. This heavy fog or mist had already covered the island. Only the outline of the island could be seen. And then he knows that slowly, this same fog will creep, means will move and come and surround the pine trees which are surrounding Sadao's house. And lastly, in few minutes, that same very fog which has covered the island, which will cover the pine trees, will come and wrap the entire house of Sadao in itself. Then he would go inside to be with his wife Hannah and his two children. Further, but at this moment the door opened and she looked out, a dark blue woolen houri over her kimono. She came to him affectionately and put her arm through his as he stood, smiled and said nothing. He had met Hannah in America, but he had waited to fall in love with her until he was sure she was Japanese. His father would never have received her unless she had been pure in her race. He wondered often whom he would have married if he had not met Hannah, and by what luck he had found her in the most casual way, by chance literally, at an American professor's house. The professor and his wife had been kind people, anxious to do something for their few foreign students, and the students, though bored, had accepted this kindness. Sadao had often told Hannah how nearly he had not gone to Professor Harley's house that night. The rooms were so small, the food so bad, the professor's wife so voluble, but he had gone, and there he had found Hannah, a new student, and had felt he would love her if it were at all possible. You might think that how and what kind of love is this? But then Sadao was a good child. He was an obedient son of his father. His father, who was a true Japanese, a traditional Japanese. And while he was standing and thinking about how very soon his house will be wrapped in the mist which has already covered the island, is coming towards the pine and then his house, suddenly the door opened and she looked out. Who looked out? His wife. She was wearing a dark blue woolen houri over her kimono. Kimono is a traditional Japanese dress, and the hauri which we are talking about is a kind of a dress which is having very loose butterfly type of hands. If anyone run, it looks like as if though the butterfly wings are flying. It's flapping over there. And then she came to him very lovingly, affectionately, and she put her arm through his. And he stood there, smiled at her, and said nothing. Instead of that, his mind went trailing back to that moment when he met Hannah first time. And you know where he met her? He met her in America. And he wanted to fall in love with her, but he waited. Really. And you know why he waited? Because he wanted to make sure that she's a Japanese. He knew that his father will not accept if she's not a pure Japanese. Pure Japanese means mother and father both Japanese. And then he sometimes wonders if he had not married Hannah, whom he would have married. And it was by chance he met Hannah. he met Hannah in his American professor's house. Actually, the American professor and his wife were very kind and generous. They often used to throw party for their foreign students who feel lonely in that place. Though the party used to be boring, but it was their kindness, no? So the students used to accept it. And Sadao often used to tell Hannah that that day he had thought that he will not go, and then suddenly he went there because the rooms used to be very small, and the food used to be very bad, and professor's wife was too loud in her talk. But still he had gone, and he found Hannah there. And Hannah, the new student, and he felt that if ever possible, he would definitely like to fall in love with her. Now he felt her hand on his arm and was aware of the pleasure it gave him, even though they had been married years enough to have two children. For they had not married heedlessly in America. They had finished their work at school and had come home to Japan, and when his father had seen her, the marriage had been arranged in the old Japanese way. Although Sadao and Hannah had talked everything over beforehand, they were perfectly happy. She laid her cheek against his arm. This paragraph clearly tells us about the love that existed between Sadao and Hannah. When she kept her arms over his arms, or you can say that when she put through his arms, he could clearly feel the pleasure of love that he feels for her, even though they were happily married to for quite a long time with two children. He says that maybe this is because they did not get married without giving a prior thought in America. After finishing their schoolwork, here it means that their studies, they came back to Japan. Her father met Hannah, approved her, and then, according to old Japanese tradition, they both got married. Though Hannah and Sadao already spoke about all these things beforehand. And now they were perfectly happy, and she laid her cheek against his arm out of love. I would like to hold the video here, and we will continue with the rest of the portions time to time with videos uploaded for this lesson. Till then, goodbye and